Have you ever walked into a room and felt an immediate shift in the energy? Not because of what someone said, but because of what they didn't say. I'm talking about that one guy in the corner, the one who's quiet, who's listening, but not with the hungry desperation of someone waiting for their turn to speak. No, he's just there, unmoving, unflustered. He's the one who seems least invested, least reactive, yet somehow, without a single word, he becomes the center of everyone's attention. The whole room, a human maelstrom of noise and neediness, revolves around his stillness. It's unnerving, isn't it? Because you want to know his secret. You want to understand why the person who's chasing is always dismissed, and the person who withdraws commands respect. I've seen it play out 100 times. A man desperate to prove himself, to be seen, to be chosen. He's the one who laughs a little too loud at every joke, who jumps into every conversation, who checks his phone every 3 minutes, just in case he missed a notification from someone, anyone. He's a living, breathing advertisement for his own validation. And what happens? People see him, they register his presence, and then they look away. He's predictable. He's disposable. You can read his entire life story from the first 5 minutes of meeting him because he's practically begging you to. Then there's the other guy, the one who just is. He doesn't need to fill the silence. He doesn't feel the terrifying pressure to perform. He might offer a single, measured thought, a subtle nod, a knowing glance, and that small, almost imperceptible gesture lands with the force of a thunderclap. Why? Because you're not expecting it. It's an act of power. It's a statement. And the statement is this: my presence is not for sale. My attention is not free. You cannot have me on command. That, my friends, is the first terrifying truth about detachment. It is not absence. It is power. It is the conscious, calculated withdrawal of your emotional neediness. And the moment you remove your neediness, you remove their leverage. Think about it. Most people spend their lives on a frantic, exhausting quest to prove, justify, and explain themselves. They live with the hope, the constant gnawing hope, of being chosen, of being liked, of being seen as worthy. But what if you stopped? What if you decided that you were already whole? What if you tore up the script they handed you and said, I'm not playing that role? The moment you stop seeking approval, you change the entire balance of power. You stop being a beggar of attention and become its very source. The world, my friends, is not drawn to what is predictable. It's drawn to what it cannot easily predict or control. There is nothing more unpredictable than a man who refuses to react on command, who will not be rattled, and who does not offer his internal world for free. Ask yourself honestly, how many times have you offered your emotions cheaply? How often have you let others feast on your need to be seen, to be understood, to be validated? Every time you get defensive, every time you over-explain a simple decision, every time you rush to respond to a text, you are subsidizing their power. You are saying, here, take this. My peace of mind, my time, my sanity. It's yours for the taking. When you detach, you disrupt this entire economy. You force them to pay, not with money, but with curiosity, with doubt, with a simmering, gnawing obsession. Because mystery is valuable. Predictability is disposable. It is the currency of the street-level magician who gives away his trick after every performance versus the grand master who makes you wonder for a lifetime. And those who truly understand this rule do not advertise their intentions. They do not reveal their every thought. They do not hand over the blueprint to their mind. They let others wonder. Detachment isn't about being cold for its own sake. It's not about being a robot. It's a calculated withdrawal, a strategic retreat from the social games everyone else is playing. Every one of those games depends on you accepting a role. The hero, the victim, the pleaser, the rebel. The moment you accept a role, you accept the script that comes with it. You become predictable. Your enemies know exactly which button to press. Your so-called friends know exactly what kind of flattery will bend you to their will. But detachment is tearing up that script. It's a quiet rebellion. It is saying, you will not know me so easily. And that ignorance, that lack of control, is intolerable to those who seek to use you. They will probe, they will provoke, they will call you arrogant, distant, even cruel. Why? Because you refuse to react on cue. Because they don't have a lever to pull. Reaction is slavery. Detachment is freedom. And only the free man can set the terms of engagement. Only the free man can say, you will meet me on my ground, on my terms, or you will not meet me at all. This is the beginning of everything. This is where your true power begins to bloom, not in what you grasp, but in what you are willing to let go of. Think about how often you have handed over power with your emotions. That flare of anger that reveals your deepest wounds. The sting of jealousy that exposes your greatest fears. The rush of defensiveness that confirms their accusations beyond a shadow of a doubt. All of it is currency. A precious emotional currency paid out without any return. You're handing over the keys to your inner fortress, a fortress you should be guarding with your life. Detachment is your refusal to subsidize their power. It is your refusal to grant them access to your internal world without a cost. I've seen this happen countless times. A friend gets a slight insult, a little offhand remark, and his face goes red. He starts explaining, justifying, giving a full-blown defense. He thinks he's winning, but he's already lost. He's paid the price. He's shown them what hurts, what scares him, what he needs to prove. And now, they have a roadmap to manipulate him forever. They know what to poke, what to say to get him to react exactly how they want. The detached man, by contrast, listens but does not confess. He observes but does not explain. He chooses his silences carefully, like a master chess player making a move, and in those silences, others project. They wonder what you know. They wonder what you think. They fill the void with their own fantasies, their own fears, their own desperate desires. You become a mirror, and the more they look, the less they see you, and the more they see themselves. That is the secret of influence without force. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to demand attention. You simply create a void, and they will rush to fill it with their own noise, their own vulnerability, their own need. Ask yourself, why do you need to be understood so badly? Why do you feel the compulsion to explain every move you make, to justify every silence, to defend every single boundary you set? It's a weakness, disguised as openness. It's a profound need to be accepted at any cost. Niccolo Machiavelli, the master of political and human strategy, understood that man is governed by appearances. But the appearance you must cultivate is not of being a pushover, a people-pleaser, a friend to all. No. The appearance you must cultivate is that of control, not need. The moment you show that you cannot be unsettled, you unsettle them. The moment you show that you can walk away, they will follow. Because freedom is magnetic, and the man who does not depend on anyone else's approval is the most dangerous of all. He cannot be bribed with flattery or threatened with rejection. He has made himself whole. He is an island of self-reliance in a sea of dependency. But let us not confuse this with indifference. Indifference is apathy. It's lifelessness. It's decay. It is a man who doesn't care about anything or anyone. He's a hollow shell. Detachment, on the other hand, is a vibrant, active state. It is focus. It is discipline. It is sovereignty. It is the art of choosing precisely where your energy goes and refusing to waste a single ounce of it on petty dramas and unearned intimacy. It's the difference between a fortress and a ruin. A fortress does not open its gates for every random traveler or every curious wanderer. It makes them earn entry. It makes them prove their intentions are good. And if they can't, the gates remain sealed. So too must you guard your mind, your emotions, your attention. Because in the brutal currency of power, attention is pure gold, and most people squander it on the worthless. They throw it away on social media, on gossip, on defending themselves against strangers. Detachment is your vault. It keeps your wealth secure until you choose to invest it wisely. Have you ever noticed how the quietest person in a meeting commands more respect than the one who rambles on endlessly? How the lover who holds something back, who doesn't pour their heart out on day one, becomes utterly irresistible. How the leader who does not react immediately to a crisis seems wiser, more formidable, more in control. This isn't an accident. This is the design of human nature. This is the way it's always been. Restraint is mistaken for depth. Silence is mistaken for knowledge. Detachment creates the illusion of mastery, even before you have fully mastered yourself. And in truth, that illusion often becomes reality, because detachment trains you to observe before you act, to measure before you speak, to hold when others grasp. It is the practice field of power. People will call you cold. Let them. They will say you are unfeeling. Let them. The man who fears these accusations will always be enslaved by them. He will forever be a people-pleaser, a slave to the whims of others. But the man who accepts misunderstanding has no master. He knows that to truly lead, you must be willing to be hated. To be respected, you must risk rejection. And to hold power, you must learn to let go of needing anyone's permission to be exactly who you are. Because your existence is not up for debate. Your worth is not a subject for public vote. Detachment isn't about having no feelings. It is about making your feelings serve you, not betray you. It's the art of keeping your most potent weapons concealed until the precise moment of need. Consider the enemy who shouts and rages. He's revealing his position, his fear, his intent, and his desperate lack of control. He's like a flailing boxer, swinging wildly in the open, leaving himself exposed. The detached man, in stark contrast, waits. He lets the other person reveal everything first, every weakness, every insecurity. In a negotiation, this is power. In a relationship, it is magnetism. In a conflict, it is strategic genius. Machiavelli wrote that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Detachment gives you that choice, because love that's offered too freely often breeds contempt. It becomes a commodity, something cheap and unearned. But love that is earned grudgingly, that's fought for, that commands loyalty. The same principle applies to your attention, your time, and your approval. What is rare is valued. What is abundant is discarded. Be rare. Stop giving yourself away so freely. Stop offering your emotional treasures to those who haven't earned them. Why do you feel the need to explain your dreams, your fears, your boundaries to people who will only use them against you? It's a form of emotional self-sabotage. Detachment is the refusal to beg for understanding. It is the refusal to buy love with obedience. It is the refusal to be reduced to a puppet whose strings are emotions others know how to pull. To detach is to reclaim sovereignty over yourself. It is to choose mystery over exposure, strategy over impulse, and power over desperation. You must understand that the world, in its cold, hard reality, rewards those who can control their own impulses. The masses are driven by emotion, reacting to every provocation, every insult, and every promise of reward. They exhaust themselves trying to prove their worth to people who will never truly value them. They are like hamsters on a wheel, running furiously, but going nowhere. But the detached man does not play this game. He does not seek validation in the eyes of the fickle. He cultivates patience like a weapon. He knows that power comes to those who can wait while others act rashly. Because in every negotiation, in every seduction, in every confrontation, the one who can afford to wait always holds the undeniable advantage. The desperate one reveals too much, too soon. The patient one collects information, tests boundaries, and discovers weaknesses. Detachment isn't passivity. It's active, strategic observation. Think about how easily people give themselves away. A single insult sends them into a fury. A small rejection drives them to beg. A simple compliment makes them pliable, eager to please. Most people are not masters of themselves. They are marionettes, dancing to the strings of anyone who knows which lever to pull. The detached man cuts those strings. He studies his own responses so he knows where he is weak, where he can be provoked. He closes those gaps. He refuses to offer predictable reactions. And that refusal drives others mad. Because if they cannot predict you, they cannot control you. If they cannot read you, they cannot use you. You become an enigma. And the human mind, in its desperate need for order and understanding, cannot resist trying to solve a mystery. There is a profound, almost terrifying power in silence. When you stop defending yourself, you stop giving them targets. When you stop explaining, you deny them ammunition. When you stop reacting, you force them to face themselves. This is why silence is so feared. Most people cannot stand it. They will demand explanations, apologies, and clarity. They will accuse you of arrogance, of cruelty. They want you to return to the script where your role is to soothe, to serve, and to obey. They want you to be a predictable source of comfort and validation. Detachment is your refusal to perform. It is the art of making your absence more powerful than your presence. When you withdraw your attention, you make others question their own worth. When you remove your validation, you reveal their dependence on it. In this way, detachment is the most honest mirror you can hold up to someone. Machiavelli would tell you that appearances are everything. You do not need to show your heart to gain loyalty. In fact, you gain more by concealing it. People respect what they do not understand. They fear what they cannot predict, and they desire what they cannot possess. Detachment cultivates all three. It is the art of strategic withholding. You give just enough to intrigue, but never enough to be owned. You share just enough to connect, but never enough to be exploited. You care, but not so much that you forget your own interests. This balance is delicate. It requires discipline, but it is the foundation of true influence. Consider the lover who reveals every insecurity, who begs for attention, who floods the other with endless messages and emotional pleas. At first, they might be pitied, but then they are ignored, and eventually, they are despised. Neediness destroys attraction because it screams weakness. It says, I cannot hold myself together without you. It's a heavy, burdensome anchor that no one wants to carry. But the detached lover remains a fortress. He does not close his gates out of fear, but out of a profound sense of discernment. He makes others earn entry, and in earning it, they value it. In valuing it, they respect it. Detachment is the difference between love that is freely given and love that is cheaply bought. One is a gift, the other is a transaction that nobody wants to make. In the arenas of politics, business, and war, detachment is not just a strategy, it is the fundamental law of survival. The general who reacts to every minor provocation exposes his entire battle plan. The negotiator who rushes to agree loses all leverage. The ruler who needs to be loved above all else becomes a slave to public opinion, forever chasing approval. Machiavelli warned against this, teaching that the prince must be willing to be feared if it secures stability. He must be a lion to scare the wolves and a fox to recognize the traps. Detachment is the essence of being both. It is not about being heartless. It is about being realistic. People are fickle. Alliances shift. Interests change. If you need constant reassurance of their loyalty, you will never sleep. But if you make their loyalty dependent on their own interests, if you are useful, respected, and a constant, compelling mystery, they will cling to you, even as they secretly resent you. This is the ultimate paradox of power. They cannot leave what they cannot control, what they cannot understand. Ask yourself, how many times have you ruined your position by over-explaining? How many times have you weakened your boundaries by justifying them? How many times have you exposed your plans, your feelings, your vulnerabilities to people who only pretended to care, who were simply gathering information to use against you? Detachment is the cure for this self-sabotage. It is the choice to act instead of react, to observe instead of confess, to guide instead of chase. It is not about closing your heart. It is about controlling its exposure. You do not give it to those who have not earned it. You do not waste it on those who would use it against you. You understand its value, so you invest it wisely, like a shrewd investor with a limited amount of gold. Detachment also serves as an ironclad shield against manipulation. The manipulator thrives on emotional chaos. They want you reactive, unstable, and desperate for approval. They want you explaining yourself endlessly so they can twist your words. They want you apologizing for having needs so they can deny them. When you become detached, you deny them these tools. You become unplayable. They will try harder at first, escalating their tactics. They will yell. They will feign hurt. They will use guilt like a weapon. But eventually, they will move on to easier prey. Because a man who cannot be provoked is a man who cannot be controlled. And in this world, control is everything. So I challenge you now. Observe your own patterns. Where do you react too quickly? Where do you give too freely? Where do you explain when silence would suffice? Where do you chase what should come to you? These are your weaknesses. These are your points of entry for those who would use you. Close them. Guard them with the ferocity of a dragon protecting its treasure. Train yourself to sit with discomfort. Let them wonder. Let them stew in their own uncertainty. Let them earn your attention, your affection, your explanation. Because in doing so, you elevate yourself from the level of the beggar to the level of the sovereign. And only the sovereign can truly choose. Detachment is the foundation of true freedom. Freedom not from responsibility, but from compulsion. Most people imagine they are free because they can do as they please. but they are slaves to their emotions, chained to the approval of others, prisoners of their own desperate need to be seen, understood, and loved at any cost. The detached man understands that real freedom is the power to choose how and when to act, without being dragged by impulse or manipulated by expectation. He knows that saying yes has no value if you cannot say no. He understands that giving has no virtue if it is demanded. So he learns to hold back, to wait, to measure, because restraint is not weakness. It is the highest form of strength. Look at those who are always reacting, always emotionally raw. They burn out. They are exhausted by drama, by conflict, by endless, pointless apologies. They try to please everyone, and, in the end, they please no one, least of all themselves. They have no center. They are shaped by every wind that blows, every opinion that is voiced, every fear that is triggered. Machiavelli would see such people as perfect subjects, easily ruled, easily manipulated. They lack the cold, brutal lucidity to step back and ask, "Is this worthy of my energy? Is this battle worth fighting? Is this alliance worth maintaining?" The detached man asks these questions constantly. He is not unfeeling. He is selective. And that selectivity is what makes him so powerful. I remember a time, years ago, when I was anything but detached. I was living in a constant state of emotional frenzy. Every text from a new love interest was a terrifying, thrilling roller coaster. Every critique at work felt like a personal attack. I'd go home and replay conversations in my head, 1,000 different scenarios, 1,000 different defenses. I was a puppet, and every single person I knew had a hand on a string. I felt a deep, gnawing fear of being misunderstood, of being disliked, of being left out. The thought of someone being angry at me sent a cold dread through my stomach. I was constantly anxious, constantly on edge, always trying to get ahead of the next crisis, the next rejection. The climax of that period came one night, with a woman I was desperately, pathetically in love with. We had a small disagreement, the kind of trivial thing that adults should resolve in 5 minutes. But for me, it was a cataclysm. She went silent. For a day, then 2. My mind became a battlefield. I felt rage. How could she do this to me? How could she be so cold, so distant? I felt fear. What if she was gone forever? What if I had said the wrong thing? I felt a desperate primal need to fix it, to make her like me again, to bring her back into my orbit. I wrote a dozen long, rambling texts, explaining, justifying, apologizing for things I hadn't even done wrong. I was on the brink of sending them all, ready to surrender my dignity, ready to beg for her to just talk to me, to give me back the emotional security she had so casually withdrawn. I was a beggar, and I was about to drop to my knees, but something in me, some tiny, nascent voice, screamed, "No." It was a moment of profound internal conflict. My heart pounded with the anxiety of being alone, of being rejected. My mind was racing, trying to convince me to just give in, to just send the messages and get it over with, to buy a moment of peace at the cost of my self-respect. I was so full of dread, of a terrifying hopelessness, that I had ruined everything. I could feel the hot sting of tears behind my eyes, tears of frustration, of helplessness, of feeling so utterly and completely out of control. My hands were shaking. I wanted to smash my phone. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but I forced myself to sit. I took a single, shuddering breath. I looked at the long, pathetic texts I had composed, and for the first time, I saw them not as a pathway to resolution, but as a roadmap to my own destruction. They were a white flag. They were a confession of my deepest, most pathetic neediness. They were me, on my knees, begging for a scrap of attention. And in that moment, I understood the lesson. The reason she was able to do this to me was because I had given her the power. I had shown her that her silence was the most potent weapon she had against me. I had given her a key to my internal world, and she was using it to turn the lights off. That was the turning point. A moment of terrifying clarity. I was facing the abyss, the absolute void of her not needing me, of her being able to just walk away. I felt a profound sense of terror. But beneath that terror, for the first time, I felt a spark of something else. Something cold and sharp and solid. It was the realization that my need for her was a weakness I could no longer afford. My emotional outbursts, my frantic attempts to justify myself, my constant anxiety, all of it was a currency I was paying out without return. And I was broke. I had nothing left to give. It was time to close the bank. I made a decision that night. A decision born not of logic, but of pure, unadulterated terror. It was the terror of continuing to live like that, as an emotional slave. With shaking hands, I selected all the messages I had written and deleted them, one by one. I didn't just delete the words. I felt like I was deleting a part of myself, a part that had been begging and pleading for its entire life. It was like I was cutting a tumor out of my soul. I threw my phone onto my bed, face down, and swore to myself that I would not touch it again. I would not check it. I would not wait. I would not hope. I would endure the agonizing silence. That night was one of the longest of my life. Every minute felt like an hour. My body was screaming at me to break, to just send one of the messages, to get a response, any response, to stop the crushing anxiety of the unknown. I could almost hear the voice in my head, the voice of my old self, the pleaser, the chaser, whispering, "Just text her. Just apologize. It's not worth it. The pain is too much. You'll lose her forever." That voice was so convincing, so familiar. It was the voice of desperation. But another voice, a new one, colder, quieter, spoke up. It said, "Let her go. If her absence breaks you, you were already broken. If you cannot stand on your own, you are not worthy of standing with anyone else." It was a brutal, honest, and utterly terrifying thought. I went to bed feeling a profound, lonely dread. The feeling was so intense, so suffocating, that it felt like an actual physical weight on my chest. I couldn't sleep. My mind was painting the worst-case scenarios. She's with someone else. She's laughing at me. She's celebrating her escape. It was pure, unadulterated fear. The next day was no better. The urge to check my phone was a physical ache. I had to consciously force my hand away from my pocket. It was a conscious decision, a repeated act of willpower. I was learning to sit in the discomfort. I was learning to tolerate the pain of not knowing. I was choosing my own sovereignty over the fleeting comfort of someone else's approval. Every hour that passed, I felt a little stronger, a little more solid. I wasn't just waiting. I was actively holding my ground. It was an internal war, and I was on the brink of losing it every single moment. This wasn't an act of revenge. It wasn't a game I was playing to get her back. It was a profound, painful realization that I had to win my own respect first. That the person I had become was someone I did not recognize and did not like. I was a man who lived and died by the opinions of others, and that was no way to live. So, I held my silence. I made myself unreachable, not as a punishment to her, but as an act of self-preservation for me. My mind kept trying to rationalize. Just one quick text. Just a simple, "Hope you're doing well. It's not needy, it's polite." But I knew that was a lie. It was the addict trying to justify one last hit. I knew that one text would lead to another, and I would be right back in the same endless cycle of validation seeking. So I sat in the emptiness. I sat with the uncertainty. I sat with the fear of being alone. And for the first time, I wasn't running from it. I was facing it head on. Then, on the third day, the twist began. A small, almost imperceptible flicker in the darkness. I was in a coffee shop, trying to read a book, my phone still face down on the table beside me. It buzzed, just once. A single short buzz. My heart nearly leaped out of my chest. I fought the urge to grab it, to devour the message. I made myself wait. I finished the page I was on, then the next page. After what felt like an eternity, I slowly, deliberately picked up the phone. It was her. A single, simple message. "You okay?" It was a small victory, but it felt like a tidal wave. She wasn't angry. She wasn't with someone else. She was curious. She had been waiting for me to react, to chase, to beg. And when I didn't, my silence had driven her crazy. My stillness had become a question she couldn't answer. I had disrupted her script. I had broken the frame. And the person who was once the hunter was now the one being hunted, if only by her own curiosity. I had done nothing. I had said nothing. My detachment had created a powerful, irresistible vacuum that she had to fill. The leverage was now mine. It was a moment of shocking realization. The greatest power lies not in what you do, but in what you refuse to do. I didn't reply immediately. My old self would have. He would have fired back a response in seconds, a sigh of relief mixed with a little bit of passive-aggressive frustration. "Yeah, I'm okay. Was a little worried about you, though." He would have revealed his hand. He would have shown her that her silence had worked. But I had made a pact with myself. I was no longer that man. I waited. For another hour. Let her sit in the silence I had just endured. Let her wonder. Let her feel the void she had created. When I finally replied, it was with a single, neutral sentence. "I'm doing well, thanks. Hope you are too." No emotion, no backstory, no explanation. And that simple, quiet statement was a shockwave. Her response came back almost instantly. This time, it was more frantic, less controlled. She started trying to fill the void. "Everything okay? You seemed quiet." She was probing, trying to get me to return to the script. She wanted me to confess my fear, my worry, my confusion. She wanted me to give her back the control she had lost. But I held firm. I replied only when I felt ready, with minimal, non-committal answers. "Yep, everything's fine. Busy week." I was a brick wall. My refusal to react was driving her insane, and it was the most exhilarating feeling I had ever experienced. This was the ultimate twist. The person who I had been chasing, the one I had been willing to beg and humiliate myself for, was now the one doing the chasing. She was the one sending the texts, trying to get a rise out of me, trying to break my composure. Her carefully constructed facade of indifference had crumbled in the face of my authentic, profound detachment. She had assumed I would be a predictable puppet, and my refusal to dance had broken her puppet strings. The power had completely shifted. Why did this happen? Because she, like most people, was used to a world of endless cheap validation. She was used to people who would explain their every move, justify their every silence, and defend every boundary. My quiet refusal to do any of that was a terrifying new variable. I had become an enigma, and the human mind, as I said before, cannot resist trying to solve a mystery. I had gone from being a predictable open book to an unreadable magnetic puzzle. My silence forced her to confront her own vulnerability. She had assumed her withdrawal would make me desperate. Instead, my lack of reaction made her question her own value. It made her wonder, does he not care? Is he not hurt? Am I not as important as I thought I was? That moment of self-doubt, of introspection, was a direct result of my detachment. It forced her to look in the mirror I was holding up, the mirror of her own need for control, and she didn't like what she saw. This is the most powerful lesson of all. Detachment isn't just a strategy for gaining power. It's a filtering mechanism. It purifies your relationships. Those who truly value you will respect your space. They won't try to goad you or manipulate you. But those who only wanted you for what you could give them, your attention, your energy, your validation, they will complain, they will accuse, and eventually, they will disappear. And that's a good thing. Let them go. Machiavelli would tell you that loyalty bought too cheaply is loyalty that will betray you. My newfound power was not in having her back, but in having her on my terms, with a healthy mutual respect that was absent before. I had been willing to trade my dignity for a moment of relief. She had been willing to manipulate me because she knew I would take the bait. My detachment changed the rules of the game. It forced us both to be more honest. I had to face my own profound fear of rejection, and she had to face her profound need to control. My refusal to play the victim role in her little drama was the most important act of self-love I had ever committed. It was a rejection of her power, yes, but more importantly, it was an affirmation of my own. This is the ultimate power move in any dynamic. The ability to walk away, to sit in silence, to refuse to explain, because every single time you justify yourself, you are implicitly telling the other person that their opinion of you is more important than your own self-respect. You are asking for their permission to be who you are. Detachment is the quiet, unbreakable declaration that you do not need permission from anyone. And the people who are not used to that, who cannot understand that level of self-possession, will be utterly captivated. You become a walking, breathing mystery they cannot solve. Detachment is the ultimate form of self-love. It's the recognition that your worth is not up for negotiation. It's the conscious choice to act instead of react, to observe instead of confess, to guide instead of chase. It is not about closing your heart to others. It is about controlling its exposure. You do not give it to those who have not earned it. You do not waste it on those who would use it against you. You understand its profound value, so you invest it wisely. This is the hard-won lesson of Machiavelli and the timeless truth of human psychology. People will not respect what is given freely. They will not value what they do not have to work for. Your emotional treasures, your vulnerability, your attention, your time, are your most precious resources. Stop selling yourself at a discount. Make others earn your trust, your affection, your respect. Because in the process of earning it, they are forced to rise to your level. You must be willing to sit with the discomfort of being misunderstood. You must be willing to let them fill the silence with their own anxiety. You must be willing to be seen as arrogant, distant, or cold, if that is the price of keeping your sovereignty. Because their accusations reveal more about their own dependence on your validation than they do about your character. Detachment will cost you. It will cost you certain relationships, certain comforts, and certain illusions. But what it gives you in return is priceless. It gives you the ability to choose who enters your life. It gives you the freedom to walk away from disrespect. It gives you the strength to endure being alone rather than being used. It grants you a presence that commands attention without ever demanding it. Because true magnetism is not in shouting your value. It is in knowing it so deeply that others feel it in your silence. And so, the final question I leave you with is this. When was the last time you let someone earn your silence? When did you last hold back an explanation, an apology, a reassurance they did not deserve? When did you last sit with the discomfort of being misunderstood rather than surrendering your truth for easy approval? These are the tests of detachment. They are not easy. They require you to embrace loneliness. They demand that you choose respect over popularity and substance over comfort. But this is the price of sovereignty. You cannot lead if you cannot stand alone. You cannot command if you cannot hold your tongue. You cannot inspire if you cannot first resist. People will not understand this. They will say you have changed. Let them. Their discomfort is proof that your old self, the always available, always explaining, always pleasing version of you, is gone. In its place stands someone who understands his worth, who refuses to be manipulated by guilt or expectation. This is not arrogance. It is clarity. And clarity is always uncomfortable for those who relied on your confusion. Detachment is not about being unloving. It is about being unowned. And only the unowned can truly love.